So for the second talk this morning, we're going to stay at the interface between people and technology. And to help us navigate this topic, we're very excited to have Kathleen Kennedy with us. With multiple leadership roles at MIT, she's truly on the front lines of technology and innovation. And I knew a lot of you are avid readers of the MIT Technology Review. She was the president of Technology Review for a few years. As executive director of the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence, Kathleen works with a multidisciplinary team of researchers on Supermind design. And I'm very excited to hear about this concept. I know it's going to come up in your presentation. She's putting into practice at MIT Open Learning a lot of the things that she's going to present to you. She leads in particular MIT Horizon, a digital learning platform helping organizations to train at scale on all the exciting new technologies we are talking about. So Kathleen, we're very excited to hear how you help people and technology work smarter together. Kathleen.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that introduction. And my voice might go a little bit, so just in case. So let's see. Let's talk about designing and training intelligent organizations. But first of all, let's talk about why we're talking about this. So Patty alluded to some of the things, but let me paint the picture a little bit more. The world is changing every day. You read the headlines, you feel it. So last year about this time, in October 2022, I spoke at a really large AI conference, over 100,000 people. And one of the other keynotes there was Sam Bankman-Fried. Interesting, right? He was a keynote. A couple weeks later, the company filed for bankruptcy. And now we know he's on trial for a lot of not great things. So cryptocurrency, something that we were really hyped up on, now not looking so great. Another issue is ransomware. Every 11 seconds, there is a ransomware attack, and the average per is $4.25 million. That's huge. Now, one we all probably have been already talking about, and you've probably seen something like this before, but ChatGPT caught on the fastest of any web platform ever in history. Took 2 months to get 100 million users. That's huge. Why is that? By the way, quick plug, this is from MIT Horizon, so we're going to talk about that later. But, so this is just an example of one of the things that you want to know about. Now, AI is also doing amazing other things besides generative AI that's taking up all the headlines. This is from some of my colleagues at MIT that we're seeing that AI models can detect cancer even better than humans. So that's actually great news in a way, thinking about what Patty was talking about, how we want to augment human intelligence with AI intelligence and think about what that means for how we are able to do things better than we were ever able to do before. Then in industry, thinking about what are the top 5 companies leading autonomous vehicles, only 2 of them are traditional automotive companies. So that's something that industry really needs to be thinking about. This disruption that's happening is happening pretty fast. And then on October 4th, which was my birthday, a startup started to test flying taxis with pilots. So, you know what? Yesterday's traffic, we needed that. So hopefully we'll be getting it soon. So this is just a few examples of how the world is changing so fast. And we're changing the way that we do everything with all of these new technologies coming together as systems. So not only AI, but blockchain, digital twin, Internet of Things, 5G. I can go on. New technologies that are changing the way that companies are operating and the people within them, how they're working and how they're working with these technologies. Now, everyone is investing in trying to figure out how to deal with all of this change. So 96% of companies, 60% are increasing their investment, 36% are going to maintain what they invested in 2022 to keep ahead. But 93% of companies are struggling with how to navigate this landscape still. So we're all trying to figure it out. Now at MIT, I work with a professor at the Center for Collective Intelligence called Tom Malone, who in 2004 wrote a book called The Future of Work, so a bit ahead of his time there. He also was the advisor for Eric Brynjolfsson, who Patty mentioned in her talk. He's been thinking about this deeply. And in 2018, he wrote a book called Superminds. And that's about how groups work together to accomplish things together more intelligently than individuals alone. And often that is with technology. And we're working on frameworks on how to do that better, because that's exactly sort of thinking about the lead up of what I just did. We're all trying to figure that out. Now, I thought this quote that he said was really interesting, because for a very long time, we've been thinking about how to create more productive organizations. But in fact, what we need to start doing is how do we create more intelligent organizations? So, I work on two things at MIT. One of them is the Center for Collective Intelligence, and the other is at MIT Open Learning, and I'm going to get to that next. So let's start with Supermind Design, which is a framework that we're building at the MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. So what this does is help organizations, individuals, people, groups, come up with innovative ways for people and technology to be organized together to accomplish goals. And a lot of it is around decision making. How many of you use design thinking? So about 50%. So we're inspired by a lot of the things that design thinking does. And there's things that we brought in from design thinking in this methodology. But then we augmented it with a lot more of the learnings that we have from the center. So we look at ways that you define the problem, how to generate ideas in new and exciting ways, and then evaluate those ideas to make better decisions and to build what we call superminds. Now, superminds, just to double click on that, superminds are groups of individuals working together to make decisions and accomplish things better than individuals alone. And often, like I said, that's augmented by new technologies. Let me talk about how it's organized. So we organize around what we call cognitive moves. Now, some of them, for those of you that use design thinking, probably understand the foundational moves. The idea of zooming in and focusing on a part of a challenge, so that if you're stuck on thinking about how to solve something, if you make the problem a little bit smaller, often you can come up with a solution in a better way. Or the opposite. If you zoom out, sometimes when you're too close to a problem, you sort of are having trouble figuring out the challenge. If you zoom out, you can come up with better ideas around how to solve it. And then my favorite on that is analogies. So how do you come up with stories or different examples of how something's been done before that will inspire you on how to address a challenge? So those are things that you've probably thought of. They're common sense in a way. Now, where the Supermind design moves come into place are probably things that are a little bit more unique to this framework. The first one is called groupify. And that's the idea of thinking about what type of supermind or what type of group would be able to accomplish this goal. And we focus this around decision making. How is the decision made? What type of group would be best used to solve something? So, most of you probably work in a hierarchy where there's an org chart, there's a boss, there's people that do things, and so on. So that's how most companies today are organized. Now you can imagine, I have a question. I've been polling audiences that I talk to. You all probably have org charts. Raise your hand if you have an org chart for your organization. Okay, so a lot of people do, but some people don't. For those of you that have org charts, how many people have AI or technology actually in your org chart? So a few, but that's not really the common norm yet. And so thinking about how we're bringing in technology into our workplace and thinking about what are the roles that that technology plays and thinking about the groups. So that's one. Second, cognify is thinking about the cognitive process. How do we make decisions? So what is the cognitive process for making a decision? You create a list of options. You remember how things like this might have happened in the past. You sense what's around you, and then you decide. You act, and then you file that away for the next time you need to make a decision. So that's a number of different things. Often sensing and thinking about how you sense will help you think about a different type of system. And now with generative AI, we're seeing create is a big area where there's leverage points for bringing in technology in new and interesting ways. The last part is technify. And technify is actually thinking creatively about how you can bring technology into a group in a way that will solve challenges in new ways. So that is Supermind design and the super design moves. This is just a quick example of how it works. And this is based on a project that we did with a company called Takeda and the government of Japan. And we did this in 2019, where we worked with them as we were developing this new framework on how to think differently about a diagnostic for depression. And not just creating a pill, but actually thinking about a new way of doing a system for a therapeutic. And so we utilized this process in groupifying and thinking about how a doctor would diagnose it and changing that to think about not just the doctor, but the whole doctor's practice. How do they diagnose depression? Zooming out and thinking about not just that, but the entire healthcare system. And then zooming in and thinking about how can a community diagnose depression? How do we bring in social networks? How do we technify it and think about technologies that can be utilized? And then coming up with a solution of how can machine learning detect patterns in online networks that predict depression? And so that's just a quick way of how that worked. And they actually created a system around that was put into practice. So we are creating Supermind design tools to actually help to do this in creative ways, utilizing right now GPT 3.5. And I'll say we've started doing that about 2.5 years ago. And now everyone's using ChatGPT, but at the time when we started creating these tools, most people were not utilizing these tools. So this is an idea, it's called the Ideator, and you can use it if you'd like on ideator.mit.edu, so check it out. But it basically augments this whole Supermind design process and gives you a series of ideas based on the different moves. The second thing that we've created is called Design Aid, and that takes ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion to help people creatively think about a wide variety of options, again, to push thinking and to help ideation. So this is one that we're working with a group that is trying to create a circular economy around footwear, and working with a number of footwear companies, and how to push the thinking on how to do that more creatively. So now that I've talked about just the framework really quickly, I want to talk to you about a few ways that we're applying Supermind design working with organizations. So one is on a project that we're working on with Toyota and the Toyota TRI, their research arm, on how computers and people can be combined to be 10x better. And so we're utilizing the Supermind design framework to find different areas to push that. And then specifically the area that we were working on and how we got to the Design Aid platform was thinking about how to do creativity and design for their cars in new and creative ways. And basically not to just create AI systems that are going to do it, but to create AI systems that will augment the human designers and push them further. Another is human-computer systems, and this was a paper that we published last year, that we did experimentation on the question of, is it cheaper to have trained human programmers? Or could you utilize AI with non-trained programmers, augmenting them to actually program websites? And so what we found was that trained programmers plus GPT-3 was 27% faster in programming than just the human or just the program itself. So the two together were much more effective. And then the other that was interesting was that the non-trained human and the generative AI system was the same speed, the same accuracy, and less expensive than trained programmers. So really interesting result in thinking about how you're investing and how you're thinking about your workforce. So just one result, but it's sort of pointing to some interesting things. The next is around hiring. We're working with Accenture on redesigning the hiring process and thinking about the human systems of the hiring and how matching roles with people that are going to perform the work, and then the algorithms that do that matching in that pairing system. So this is some interesting work that we'll be publishing on in the near term. This is a project that I'm really excited on, and I think we'll want to keep our eye on. It's thinking about, at a country level, how is AI empowering the people, institutions, and the city of Singapore? And specifically, a lot of, again, the things that Patty was talking about is the importance of how the social structures are going to change. How is this going to impact society and the way that we work? And we really need to rethink our relationship with technology and be thoughtful about it. So we're going to be doing this on a large scale. There are 17 PIs from across MIT involved in this project. And my part of it is working on thinking about applying this Supermind design methodology. And actually, we're going to be looking at cataloging, creating an anthology of tasks so that we can deeply look at how work is done and how we can do that better. The Open Innovation Research Initiative is a project that we've been doing with NATO, and that's looking at how NATO does wargaming and how that can be digitized and scaled. And not only is that applied to wargaming, although, of course, with recent events, that's really important in thinking about how technology is being applied in warfare, but it's also decision-making. And this type of work can be applied in business as well. So this is a really interesting initiative about decision-making in complex systems. Now, some other work that we've been doing for a long time, the Climate Collab, is looking at how do you create an online community that can think about climate change in new ways. And that was something that was started in 2009 and actually has been spun out from MIT and is being done with a group called Wazuku that does this at a large scale. We did a big project with the government of Madrid in looking at how do you engage everyone in the challenges of climate change, and how do you bring in society, how do you think about online platforms, how do you think of governing in new ways that everyone's involved in being part of the solution. We pushed that further in thinking about crowd law and how at a country level, we did this with the Senate of Chile, and they were launching a new law around cancer. And we worked with them to create a platform that would allow all citizens to contribute to that law. We had thousands of contributions on the platform, and 41 of them were actually incorporated in some way into the law. So the ability to bring in citizens actually into the process. And that's so important right now where I feel like societies are feeling disconnected from their government. How do we use technology in good ways to bring people in? And then lastly, the Rethinking Therapeutics project that we did with Takeda that I mentioned. And that was before the pandemic, in thinking about depression on a country level. Now, that's even more important. How do we think about new techniques to rethink how we do therapeutics? This is just some of the people that I work with on all of this work at the Center for Collective Intelligence. And now let's move over to the other side of my work with open learning. So here we're taking frameworks, and this is really me as what I call myself a pracademic. I'm not an academic per se as much as a pracademic who I want to think about how do we apply all the research that we do and push it into the world in practical ways. So this project that I'm working on called MIT Horizon is part of MIT Open Learning. And MIT Open Learning was created 10 years ago to help push a lot of the really great research and learning around teaching out into the world. And there's platforms called MIT Open Courseware that MIT pushes all of MIT training out into the world. MIT Horizon is a new platform launched just 3 years ago to help organizations upskill at scale on new technologies. So, actually, I have a question here. How many people in this room are programmers? So just a few. So the good news is not everyone needs to be an AI programmer. But what everyone does need is to have a basic proficiency around new technology. That's really important. And it's very important in everyone's organizations that everyone has a similar understanding of these new technologies, meaning that you use common definitions. So when you're in meetings and communicating with each other, that when you say some kind of technology jargon, that you all understand what you mean when you say that. So everyone is struggling with this challenge, just like digital disruption. According to the World Economic Forum jobs report that just came out this year, 6 out of 10 workers will need to be trained in the next few years. But only 30% of organizations are prepared to help their employees close that gap. And this is the reason that we've created this work, is to help solve that challenge. But upskilling is not just teaching people about new technologies. It's actually really understanding also how it can be applied. So, let me talk about some of the frameworks and bases that we used to create this platform. So one of them is called Agile Continuous Education. And that's the concept that you need to have multiple modalities for learning and training. So there is, as an individual, you can do things yourself asynchronously. So online tools, different platforms that you use that you can work on at your own pace yourself. Then there's group work, where those things that you learn as an individual will be reinforced working together as a group, working as a team, working on a project, working together competitively. And then the last bit is taking that learning that you did yourself individually, that you did together in a class or as a group or in a workshop, and applying that in a mentored way at work, either with sort of a boss in a system like that, or actually a mentoring system or an internship. So these are things that we see in upskilling programs are critical, and it needs to be done continuously. That gone are the days where you went to college, you got a job, and you worked your way up within that organization, and that was the end of your education. We're seeing that with the progression and the speed that technology and our world is changing, that continuous education is really important. The science of learning. We have a number of learning researchers, instructional designers, and very talented faculty and staff at MIT. And we focus a lot on the science of learning. Couple principles that we see that are really important, and especially with the advent, we think about how the principles and the new technology tools that we're building, how to incorporate them. So thinking about active learning, how to make sure that it's not just an individual just reading and trying to memorize something, and we'll come back to that on the second point, but what are different exercises and different ways that the learning will be active, or working together in a group to actively push forward and cement that thing in your mind. I'm sure all of you, things that you remember often because you remember where you were, or that moment that you made that click in your mind of learning something. That feeds into also how the memory works. That I thought, it was really interesting in Patty's talk how of course, we all have sort of memory gaffes, and that at MIT we're building tools that are going to help extend our memories so that there will be tools that will augment that. But until we have that fully, in building learning platforms, we want to think about the science of how our memories work. And frankly, I think it is dangerous if we say, oh, well, now that we have all of these tools, we don't need to be teaching and training humans anymore. So, I think we're going to have to figure out the balance on that one. And then the last one, so important, motivation. At dinner last night, we had a discussion, and I was talking about how I think incentives are so important. This is a really critical one, especially when you're thinking, if you're an organization thinking about upskilling, how do you think about the incentives for people in your organization to actually sort of do the training that you're trying to motivate them to do? And so the science around fueling motivation is critical in another aspect of what we bring in. And then the second is our learner data, that we are constantly learning from the data from these platforms and understanding how different aspects of things are performing. So that I'm sure everyone has dashboards in their work and how you're understanding how your business is working. We're monitoring the data on the platform and understanding that. So this is the platform, MIT Horizon. It is a platform of content that is created at MIT, working with SMEs, subject matter experts on specific topics that are MIT faculty and trained researchers, as well as we work with global SMEs in industry that talk about and teach about the basics of all technologies. So it's basically, you want to think about a 101 and a 201. So ways that build a foundation across the entire organizations on all of the critical technologies that are disrupting our world and changing our world. So as I said, 5G, artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality, and so on. The second type of technology, of topic, that beyond technology, because it's not just technology, but then also thinking about how technologies are applied. So we have what we call a horizontal topic around sustainability. We're working on different ones on supply chain, DEI, so different topic areas like that where technology plays a role in different aspects of the very important things. And then the last bit is around the human skills and leadership. And that's an area that we're working on developing even further. Now, this is the library that is done asynchronously, that anyone will use as an individual in their own time, and there's learning pathways and journeys and interactive aspects of things. And then we have Horizon Experiences, which are interactive, collaborative group learning experiences, so that second bit, that group bit, that's really important to reinforcing the learning. And then the last part are tools that we're creating that will help push this forward into organizations. And right now, the first one is a library of impact spotlights, which are case studies of new technologies being applied, created in a tool, and we're going to build this into a sort of a larger interactive tool that you can understand how new technologies are applied. Now, this is feedback from our learners and just understanding how they're thinking about it. That the bite-sized aspects of things and doing it at self-paced is really useful and helps people that are intimidated by new technologies have something that they're able to consult at all times. It fills the gap across multiple areas of things. And that the frozen middle, which we're seeing in a lot of organizations, it's a way to help transform that. And this is so the two aspects of this work of new tools for how we can construct new ways to organize, and then how do we upskill those organizations to ultimately make them more intelligent. So we're working with a number of different organizations. In the private sector, we work with Schlumberger, BMW, Aetna Healthcare, General Mills, sort of large organizations that are global companies. And then in the public sphere, we're working with a lot of organizations. We're working with the UN, we're working with the UK government, and we've been doing a lot of work with the US Air Force and the US DoD. Large organizations that are looking at transforming. So the US Air Force specifically, we've been doing a long-term research project with studying how they are specifically transforming using AI across the entire force. So that's been a long-term project that we've been doing, and that has helped us. We're always taking the research that we're doing with working with these large organizations and feeding that back into the product. So thinking about a product like this at MIT is not just a commercial product like LinkedIn Learning, but in fact a research-based platform that we're looking at how to always improve, and we'll be injecting a lot of generative AI in it to come. So I leave you with, well, it is weird, at the end it just stops. This phrase that I think is just so important, that not only having a productive organization, but it is so important that you have an intelligent one. And I hope I gave you some ideas on how to start building that. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kathleen. We have time to take 2 questions, and I can see online we have quite a few of them. So I will let you pick the question, maybe read it out loud, and pick the one you'd like to tackle first.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. So I think that the BCG one, that's interesting. So BCG recently published the results of an internal study with consultants testing GPT-4. The diversity of new ideas was reduced by 41%. So this is something that we're going to be studying. We don't have the answer on this yet, but we are working with a different consulting company, not BCG, not to be named yet, but we are working with them on utilizing GPT-4 and our Ideator platform on looking at just this point. I agree, this is something that sort of a theme that we're starting to see of how do we make sure that we're not just completely dumbing down our workforces and our people by utilizing these tools. And so I think that the jury's still out on how we navigate on this one, but this is definitely something, a trend to keep an eye on, and we're going to be doing some research on it. So keep an eye on MIT CCI will be publishing something on this soon.
Maybe one question instead of reading what's here. I'd like to ask you, Kathleen, how do companies get involved with MIT Horizon? What you presented on
Sure.
open learning is super interesting. Practically speaking, how do they get involved?
So right now, MIT Horizon is purely a B2B platform. So we don't have a consumer route yet for individuals. We work with large organizations. It's a very simple SaaS model. So you can either email me directly, or we have a whole website that explains a lot about it, and that you can contact us to talk about more. And we work directly with our customers on understanding what their goals, what they're trying to achieve, and tailoring that product to them. So it's not free, but although we do free trials so you can try it out and determine if that works for you.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll take maybe one more. I like the first question. In your Supermind framework, I suppose that more diverse group, the more diverse the group, the more efficient it is. So can you share some insights on that?
Sure. So measuring collective intelligence is something, a long practice within the Center for Collective Intelligence. And actually, it was one of the reasons why I joined the center. I liked some of the results that they found. And one of them was, the more diverse a group was specifically, the more women in a group, the more intelligent that group was. I really liked that result. So yes, diversity matters.
Great, and I think we can end on this great statement. So thank you very much, Kathleen. Thank you.
Thank you.